Hi everyone, welcome for join. I'll start again. Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining Pink Saltire's Community Matters live streamed interviews. Tonight we're a bit later than usual, but it was just to make sure that everybody could attend. Last month, on the 24th of July, I attended a rally for trans rights. This was organised by LGBT Labour, who might just be corrected on that. There was a number of speakers there from different parties in Scotland discussing what it was like to get involved in politics, what personal aspects of their life informed their politics, and what it was like being in a party, campaigning for a party, campaigning for office sometimes, and being trans or non-binary. So, as we read so much about so-called trans activists in the press and online, why don't we hear from some activists who happen to be trans or non-binary? So, Colin, can you get everybody on screen for me? Oh. There we are. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Cheers. I think I will go to Heather first because, well, Heather, am I right in thinking you organised the rally?
Yes, yeah, we organised the rally for trans rights.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it was part. Sorry.
On you go. On you go.
Oh no, I was just going to say it was part of a series of things that we've done, mostly around the Gender Recognition Act, but just in general as well, just sort of educational type things.
And that's basically what I want to do here, is give you a platform to kind of discuss what you talked about during the rally. Who wants to go first? Who wants to tell me what was it that got you involved in activism and politics in the first place? Oh, and volunteers.
Silence.
Why don't you go first, Heather? Oh no, Cass, on you go, on you go. Whoever wants to go first.
Cass, you can go first, it's fine.
Oh God, right, thanks, alphabetical. I was back in the day, and it was Brexit really that got me back into politics about 3 years ago. And not outrageously long after that, I actually came out as being non-binary, and it was around the time when there was an awful lot of backlash against, trans people, and the GRA reform was really starting to take off. And I wouldn't like to say I got dragged into that kicking and screaming, but I started getting quite noisy about it. That's how I met Emma. He probably regrets every second of it now, but it started becoming more and more obvious to me that if I was going to be open about being non-binary, then this was something that we clearly need to be supporting. And certainly since then, I've become quite active in our LGBT side, although we're not the biggest parties in Scotland. And certainly since then, I think some people certainly will probably see me kicking around, very much kind of promoting things about positive GRA reform and about education, about, kind of who we are and everything. And I don't get it anywhere near as badly as most trans activists, but there's been a bit of a backlash for that. So it's certainly now LGBT activism as being political is very important to me, and the party to me as well.
The last bit broke off, Cass.
Cross party working. We're all of us are in this together. So it makes sense that on issues like GRA reform and education and getting rid of conversion therapy, we all really need to be getting to know each other and working together, because it doesn't make any sense for us not to be.
And that's something that came across in the rally, was the solidarity. Even though you are from different parties, there is that solidarity there. Is that what you felt, Heather?
Yeah, we've what we've tried to do is to bring everybody together, because it affects all of us. I mean, I think the Scottish Greens were the first people to do stuff that pulled everybody together, and they pulled me and they pulled Emma, obviously, and then Finley from Out for Indie as well, all to their AGM. And then we just started inviting each other to speak at events.
Can you maybe tell us what got you first involved in politics, Heather?
Well, I got involved in politics quite a long time ago. So I was involved in politics. Well, I guess you could say my first political act was back in the miners' strike when I was about 9 years old, and I donated my pocket money to the Miners' Support Fund. But my first real proper serious political type stuff was around the Iraq War in 2001. So yeah, I've been involved in politics, mostly local politics, mostly not party political, but just campaigning on different issues and things since then. Then when I moved up to Scotland, well, actually, just before I started my transition. When I moved up to Scotland, I decided I needed to join a political party rather than just, be a random activist. I looked around, and Labour was the party that mostly closely aligned to where I was, so that was the party I joined. Yeah, when I transitioned, I thought, well, that's my campaigning over and done with, because nobody's gonna listen to like a freak like me. So I was like, okay, well, that's that. And then I attended an event down in England for activists in the Labour Party who are trans, and I found that it's not as big a barrier as people as I thought it was going to be. So I started getting more involved.
Emma, what about you? How did you get involved in politics to begin with?
I mean, I think my path was slightly different. I was never really politically active up until a few years ago. I kind of became involved in politics as a trans activist more than a political activist. A lot of my learning joining parties has been on the other things that the party stands for. I mean, I had a tweet the other day about joining the Green Party, and actually finding after I joined that they align more with, my other values other than just LGBT rights. So I think that's been an interesting journey for me, but I've kind of always put myself in the place of, right, well, I'm here to hopefully help whatever political party I'm involved in be more inclusive of LGBT people, of trans people, and that's kind of always been my stance on it.
So you came in from a real personal point of view. It wasn't political. It was more trans activism.
Yeah, it was how, particularly with the GRA coming up and all the backlash that we've seen. It's how do I use my experience as an activist to try and help that process, help that discussion. I don't know whether I've helped it at all. It feels like a never-ending challenge at the moment as to how, although everybody said it from day one, that we should be sitting down and having a reasonable discussion. I've seen very few people actually willing to do that.
It's frustrating. What about you, Teddy? What was it that how did you get involved in activism and politics? Oh,
can you hear me now? Okay, sorry, yeah, I was kind of squidging my thumb in between like a bowl I'm propping this phone up with. So I got into activism kind of interestingly, like, I think a wee bit like Emma, it sort of started out with personal experience. I think probably my first time I got, hashtag political was like, even just at a very young age, I was quite severely bullied for being very femme and very camp and like a coded queer child when I was like 13 and 14. And I always found this whole GRA discussion so bizarre, like, and because when I was at that age, I used to go to the library and I wanted to almost get involved in feminism because that's actually my gateway to trans activism was through feminism. Hilariously through Germaine Greer, because those were the only books that were available in the library at the time. So my only understanding of trans people was through them. So it wasn't until I was like 21 when I actually started meeting other trans people. I'm just like, oh wait, this isn't the monster Germaine Greer was talking about. This is actually me she's talking about here. So it was a very interesting moment where this sort of GRA discussion sort of erupted in the public sphere, because it's just like, oh my God, it's like having your parents argue in public. It's really weird because you're past and it's playing out in front of you. But yeah, like, so I started off in academia and I got really into like learning about myself and my own identity and looking back at my past to reclaim it. But I felt I just wasn't doing anything on like the public sphere. There was like, I felt I was in a position of a lot of privilege, that I had all these thoughts, but I wasn't doing anything with them. So that's when I kind of thought, okay, I should probably get involved in party politics. And I kind of have a similar situation with Emma. Like I dance between SNP and Greens, and I'm right now I'm in the SNP, and yeah, like it was kind of a baptism of fire when I started doing trans activism, because I was a visibly gender non-conforming person. I'm quite, I'm not wearing any makeup today, but like I took a very public space as a trans person. My body was reading as like, not passing trans. So because of that, I was very heavily targeted by this anti-trans brigade. And I think it just sort of, just all of a sudden like shoved me into the front lines. So it took so I've been within that sort of frontline landscape for about a year now, just working away and doing what I can. But yeah, I think it was this GRA discussion, I think kind of, it lights the emotions of not just trans people, but cis people as well, as they're seeing how horrific it is. But I think, as the other people have been saying on this chat, like I think a lot of my activism I'm seeing now and what, got me into activism is that you want to improve the lives of trans people. And I think, there's healthcare issues, there's homelessness, the current discussions about reparative therapy or basically conversion therapy for trans children. These are all things that I'm very passionate about, and I just don't want to see the same pain I did growing up being inflicted upon this new generation of younger trans people coming out. So that's why I'm kind of doing my stuff right now.
All right, can we get Dylan? Are they here? Oh, coming and going. I'll give them a second and see if they come back. Oh, here we go. Hi, Dylan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm having internet problems.
That's all right. We'll go as long as the internet works. We will keep going. The same question to you. What was it that got you involved? And I suppose you've also got a unique point of view, being from the Scottish Youth Parliament.
Yeah. As soon as I kind of saw there were things wrong, I was like, well, I should try and fix them. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started being involved in politics before I knew I was trans, when I was about 13, which was only 2 years ago. And then I got into the climate strike, so I was really, really actively involved. And I never really thought that being trans would be a problem. Like, it wasn't the main thing I was caring about. It was the climate. But since then, it's kind of gone hand in hand, because I can't seem to do anything for the climate without people bringing up that I'm trans and using that against me somehow. So it's kind of highlighted for me, especially since I've been more active on Twitter, how bad the situation actually is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I ended up getting involved. And I've only really been politically aware since like 2015, 2016, which is when things started getting pretty mainstream in a not great way. So it's kind of just been, it was quite a natural, I don't want to say natural, but it was like an obvious decision to just campaign, I guess. And I originally thought about joining the SNP when I was younger, as my parents were in that as well. But then they had Joan McAlpine, MSP, speak at our branch, and I was not comfortable with that, and neither was my dad. So he left, and I was like, well, that's not the party for me. And then about a year later, I joined the Greens. So that's kind of my very short political journey because I'm quite young. But yeah.
I think it's a good point, though, that you've made where you see inequalities, you see injustices, and that's what's got you all involved in one way or another. But because of the GRA and the atmosphere that's came along, you have kind of been, like Teddy said, put to the front or targeted. How have you found that from within? You'll expect to be targeted from political enemies or opponents, but how have you found that from within your own parliaments or parties that you're members of? Whoever wants to go first. It's a big question. Oh, it's quietly. Teddy, did you put your hands up?
The thumb cover. There we go. Once again, behind the ball. But yeah, it's been very strange because I think in this whole discussion about trans rights, SNP has currently, it's clustered around our own party, and I think it's so bizarre because if you're actually internal to the SNP, there is actually I think it's so bizarre because there is so much love within the SNP in terms of allyship towards trans people, and I think it's unfortunate because what has happened essentially is the villain in this kind of narrative is actually a lot to do with this sort of outrage economy that's emerged due to just transphobia in the press for such a long time that has, pushed up a lot of anti-trans sentiment. I think this is even in leftist spheres where you wouldn't expect this. The New Statesman has been running a transphobic rhetoric way before GRA, for 10 years now, I'd say. But I think I have admitted it. I wrote a letter that went viral recently in regards to just abuse that I had experienced within the party due to anti-trans activists. Now, I can't disclose further information about it just because the investigation is ongoing. But I was, it was traumatizing. I was very scared, and I think it's just by naming it and coming forward with it, I think it's because I think it really ruptures the optic that there's this big narrative right now that trans people are these evil looming predators, when actually this is when you labels us as predators, what you're doing is basically painting a target on us and saying come and attack us when we're just trying to live our lives. And it is almost a justification for violence. It's even when they misgender us, they say, oh, it's nothing. It's you're just giving a different pronoun that gives you the privilege of a man. But no, when you say you're someone who you're not, that's a very and saying you're not actually that's actually a very politically powerful act, and it is an incitement to violence because it actually allows you to take away a bit of your claim to humanity and make your life more precarious by inviting harm to come towards you. Hence, I have a mum's net for it. But yeah, that's my experiences. So I am getting a lot of love, and there's so much support in the party. But at the same time, I think just accountability is so needed right now, and I'm excited to see where that might go, I hope, in the future.
Who else? Emma?
Right, I'll go. I guess two sides of a coin here. As former co-convener of Out for Indy, yes, I would back up what Teddy said. There were definitely a lot of people within the party who were supportive and wanted to try and support you. But I think for me, it was let down by the structures or by the leadership. If things were happening and we were putting in complaints or bringing incidences up, you got to a point where you just expected nothing to happen about it. You just expected silence. So I guess that's why I made the decision to leave, because I felt like it didn't matter what I did unless we could actually get the leadership on board to do something about it, it made no difference. I could shout every day of the week, but unless the people that have actually got the power did something about it, it doesn't get anywhere. So I joined the Rainbow Greens, and I guess that was a bit strange as well, because I think I'd only joined the party, I think, right the day before lockdown. And then was elected as co-convener at the AGM about a month or so later. And I was like, here we go again, what am I doing? But it's a really different experience. In fact, sometimes I feel like I don't really have that much to do. A lot of the drive within the Greens is done by the Women's Network in challenging the anti-trans rhetoric. Obviously, Rainbow Greens are consulted and have a part in it, but to me, the fact that the Women's Network takes a focal point in challenging it, and the leadership, I can't say enough for the leadership. I remember one of the things I put on Twitter about something that had happened while I was in the SNP, and I actually had Lorna Slater commenting on it, saying, if anything like this ever happens to you in our party, come and reach out to me. We've got your back. And I was just like, wow, what a difference. That was one of the leaders of my party standing up right away and saying, if this stuff happens to you here, you come and tell us. And that, I just don't think you can take away how safe that instantly makes you feel, because you've got the people that are in charge actually publicly standing up for you.
Yeah, I think that makes a massive difference, especially if you're going to do even events like this and talk publicly and be open as you are. You need that security to just feel safe, like what you're saying. Heather, what about you? How have you found campaigning from within your party? How have you found the support?
My local branch has been absolutely fantastic. No problems with them at all. And personally, I've not had any transphobic rhetoric aimed at me in my direction. But I agree with Emma. It's like the complaints process is what needs sorting. Our complaints process seems to be almost like a black hole. You'll log these complaints against people and never hear anything back from them. Get the automated response that's like, oh yeah, you've logged this complaint, and then that's it. And it is quite demoralizing. It's almost as if it's MSPs and MPs, they're at one level, and activists are, their opinion doesn't count. They don't matter. It's only what MPs and MSPs say that's important. That's how it feels sometimes. Anyway.
Yeah, Cass, how have you found campaigning?
I've been very lucky, and when I came out as being non-binary and said, right, please don't use my old name anymore, my birth name, getting my family to do that is probably harder. They were fine with that. There's been a little bit from a couple of individuals. I was referred to as a TRA, but which I am a trans rights activist, sort of, accidentally. But the way it was said, it was the tone. Oh, you're one of one of these militant people and I'm kind of like, oh no, I don't agree with violence or anything else like that. And there's with the wider Lib Dems, there are elements of that. We're very, very lucky in that federally we've got a really strong LGBT network, plus network, where I've made some very, very good friends. A lot of who are trans. Some left the party over Philip Lee last year, and some have come back, which is good. And they are very supportive. They've had fringes. They had the Equality Network, Scottish Trans Alliance, down about just over a year ago, talking about, literally, it was this kind of thing, but it was in a room. There was a lot of people there, and it was really well supported. But there was an incident last year when I posted a picture of myself on Non-Binary Visibility Day. And the next thing I know, I meet up with one of Emma's colleagues. Sorry, the cat is now investigating at the back of this, by the way. If everything goes pear-shaped. And I was chatting to Rebecca, and Rebecca's like, are you aware that picture's been screen grabbed, and there's some rather nasty anti-trans organisations have been posting stuff? Did a bit of a look, and it was I was quite taken aback. I did not think that would happen at all. I was quite taken aback at some of the things that were said. And when I was then, trying to sort things out online, and I reached out to my own party up here in Scotland, I didn't feel I got that much support. And one of life's little ironies, I got a crap load of support from the Greens and the SNP. All of who were like, and the Labour Party is like, what the hell can we do? And I'm just like, shut this stuff down. I mean, I had a lot of support from, and also down south, I had a lot of support. But, although we have disciplinary processes, I'm going to echo what the other guys were saying. You'll make a complaint, but how far does it go? Now, I haven't had to make a complaint myself. I know other people who have, and they very much feel that, parties will talk the talk, but when it comes to walking the walk and actually dealing with it, they won't. And certainly in our party more recently, the whole thing about J.K. Rowling and free speech has been coming up time and time again, and there's an awful lot of people who are getting excused for saying very transphobic things. And when you say, this is actually transphobic, what you're saying is there's no basis in fact for what's being said about toilets and everything else like that. And yet this argument about free speech is being pushed, and I'm not okay with that, really, just from generally wherever you hear it from.
It seems like free speech for some, but not for many. I'm sure, Dylan, you can relate to that, having arguments about free speech. How have you found the support?
I think you're probably referencing the situation with the Scottish Parliament. So September last year, I tweeted that Joanna Cherry is transphobic because she is. I thought that was like a fact, but I was told to take it down by the CEO of the Youth Parliament if I wanted to continue being a member. So this was under the being politically impartial, which made no sense because it's not because she was in the SNP, it was purely just because she's a transphobe. So that blew up quite recently when I pointed this out on Twitter, and it got a little bit of attention. So I've been dealing with that, and it's not necessarily that there's been transphobia, it's that I feel less able to call out transphobia when I see it. So it just feels like it would be different if it wasn't transphobia. And because lately I've seen lots of MSYPs criticising the government and John Swinney over the SQ8, but that is politically impartial, but what I said isn't. It just doesn't feel like the free speech thing is equal both ways, if that makes sense. And then what Emma said about the Greens, because I'm in that as well, it does just feel like such a safe, caring environment, which is just really good, particularly for me as a really young trans person. Like, technically, legally, I'm a child, so it's just to have that protective environment that my parents as well can be comfortable sending me off to on my own. At my first ever Green meeting, Andy Whiteman and Alison Johnson, the two MSPs from my area, they recognised me from climate activism. They took me in and they sat down with me. They explained what was going on, and they even gave me their spare chocolate that was passed around in the meeting. So it's such a friendly, kind environment. I feel really safe in it. It's just that difference of in the Greens, I know that if something happened, I could call it out and it would get dealt with. And in the SYP, I just don't feel like it would if it happened, which thankfully it hasn't, but it's just not a great place to be as a minority if you don't feel like you can call out things that happen.
You have to feel supported in it. Like, for me, even when you think about Twitter and online spaces, even as a child, in the eyes of the law, you're not safe from the rhetoric and the abuse that is you're a target of. Not because you're politically active, but mainly because you're trans, which makes no sense. No sense. So I think to be involved politically then, it's a big ask to put yourself in that position without feeling supported. How has that atmosphere that's been generated from the GRA and the press and the tabloids, how has that impacted you, Dylan? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think I have particularly thick skin, I guess. I just, it's a sad little person. I don't really care. I'm fine. So I just don't really care what other people think about me too much, as long as I know what I'm doing is right.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get to me too much, but it can be just a bit upsetting to know how many people don't think I deserve the same rights as them.
Mm-hmm.
That hurts a little bit. Like when they all come on and call me a misogynist just because I said, yes, you guys being mean made me really, really, really sad. Apparently that makes me a misogynist. It's just all that kind of stuff. I can straight up say this kind of healthcare was life-saving for me, and they'll say that I should have it taken away from me. It's just that kind of disregard for other people. It can get a bit much sometimes, but I'm usually decent at ignoring it.
Well, you're in good company here, I think, for getting abuse online with everybody nodding their heads. Teddy, what about you? You're nodding emphatically there.
There we go again. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, yeah. Like I think it is. No, I agree entirely with what you went through, Dylan. And I think the abuse is just absolutely abhorrent, and I find it heartbreaking that it would go also for someone as young as you. And I think it's just so inappropriate of this behavior, and it's usually like it's from adult people. Like it tends to be also. Well, once again, I'm not like creating an ageist binary here, but I think it is also like clusters towards older generations who have this sort of ideology, and sometimes, and I just think that's so horrible. For myself, like I felt the abuse was just horrifying. As like for me, is when it happened to me. I remember, as I said, I sat in the room and I just disassociated. Like this is what they say is just like, oh, they said nasty things about me on Twitter. This bleeds into my lived experience every day. This is me going into a room and things being said and like in a tiny room about the size of a kitchen, and then just all crowding around me, and then just sharing pictures of, girl Drummond and saying, oh, look at this person. It's just, it was just so painful, and I just feel like I could just sit there and I just sort of completely disassociated, and it was traumatic. And I just feel like it's just almost this complete drive to push trans people out of public life. And I think there's nothing to do anymore with the GRA. The GRA was almost the cornerstone of the discussion. It was like what opened the floodgate. But once the floodgate is open, they've just gone for everything. And I think what really hurts me is like seeing, once again, like young people like you who are being brave, who are, asserting your identity, especially in the public sphere, and then coming for you. I just think I find it just heartbreaking. And I think this is where we also got to talk about vulnerability as well, and what we can do as communities to kind of like, stop this abuse from happening in the future, because we've got to prevent it. It's just, while also like keeping your voice amplified.
Mm-hmm. When you're in a minority and you see injustice and you go through the mainstream channels to join a political party, you campaign, you do the work, you should be rewarded for that. That's what we're all told to do. That's what our rights to do that. And I don't think that right should be taken off you just because you happen to be in that minority or happen to be trans or whatever. Cass, what about you? You mentioned about online stuff. What kind of impact has that had on you? At the time, that sounded awful, what you went through.
Teddy said it right. I mean, first thing was I felt just completely dissociated, like it wasn't happening, and I recognised that because that had happened before and for something completely different. But I do remember feeling, that it wasn't because, I usually keep my picture off my profile. I have it on and I have it off, and I haven't had a picture of it, but that, I posted a picture of myself on social media, and it's the fact that that picture was shared. It was very obviously me. I'd had an incident the previous summer when I'd been, because I'm part of another minority, I had been spat at in the street simply for wearing a symbol of my faith, which funnily enough I don't do anymore. So I was very, very aware that things, can escalate. But this was a picture of me, which meant other people looking at that knew who I was. I felt very, very afraid. I know I was probably on the phone to Emma and texting, or at least messaging it. And I don't know if Emma remembers the conversation. I was absolutely, if you'll excuse my French, the things were coming out my posterior that really, brick shaped. I was absolutely terrified and sat down and said, "You really need to report this to the police." Police admitted that the law is not strong enough. They don't have the resources, if they don't have the training to deal with it. But if your picture is out there and you're being outed, it really does, it does horrible things to your mental health, because you feel very, it's the kind of it's nasty for your self-confidence to start with. Although I bounced back relatively quickly despite stuff I didn't deal with, you do feel very unsafe. And like I said, something had happened to me the previous summer, and I was very aware that, what is the next thing if somebody comes up to me in the street, and because they've seen my picture, I've been outed as being, not like everybody else. It was a big concern. I think I didn't go out for at least a couple of weeks unless I knew it was places where I felt absolutely safe I could get home quickly. And it really did consume me. I was talking about it at the time. I would literally be shaken about it, because I really was that scared that somebody was going to use the opportunity to do something worse, or I don't know, approach my employer or whatever, because that came up. They went all over my profile. They went into my Facebook and got details and all this kind of thing. It was quite, and it's aimed personally at you. It's very personal. There's it's not pleasant. Sorry, I really don't like talking.
No, I'm sorry. I think it's worth going through that difficulty so people can. Sorry, on you go, Cass.
Yeah. I don't get this anywhere near as badly as some of my friends who are trans. Because I know in the point, I'm non-binary, and I always try and pull back. My trans so much worse than I did, and I've had it so much more invasive.
Oh, I think we've lost Cass. Oh. Can anyone hear her? No. Right.
Kind of like.
She's still going. Oh, sorry, they're still going. Oh, we're gone. Right, Emma, what about you? Can we ask you the same question? How have you found the online spaces? Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
I'm being controlled here. I'm only allowed to talk when they say so. I think I think I said a bit about this in the rally as well. Like, it's kind of okay if you're involved in politics as long as you're a quiet trans person. But if you actually become vocal and get involved, that's when you get massive amounts of abuse.
Everybody.
I know, again, I said at the rally when I was elected as a branch women's officer, and my branch was great with me. Apart from the fact the convener didn't actually agree with all women shortlists, which was a bit of that's interesting as an older woman, why don't you believe in all women shortlists? But It kind of came to a head. People started, I watched them for like 2 days on Twitter, trying to figure out what branch I was in, because I would never say publicly what branch I'm in. And I still don't say publicly where I live. And there's really good reasons why I don't tell people where I live. But they spent 2 days trying to find out what branch I was in. I had a branch exec meeting, I think, on the first day of that, and I went, look, I'm feeling really unsafe. When you look on my profile on the party website, my address, mobile number, and everything is available to every member of my branch. And I don't feel safe with that. So HQ were contacted the next morning and got all my details taken off. I literally just left a generic email that I had set up. So if branch members wanted to contact me, they could use that email. And the next day, the anti-trans people had found out what branch I was in and were actually tweeting it out all over the place, saying what branch I was in. So that went from there to I had the police involved, who were as much use as a chocolate teapot. You know, unless somebody was actually turning up at my door and throwing bricks through my window, I don't think the police were particularly interested at all. I spoke to the party and we had security measures put in place for me at conference. And when I think about it, I'm going, for me to need security to go to a party political conference, I think that was the point I should have been questioning, why the hell am I doing this? You know, why am I putting my own safety at risk being involved in this? But I think one of the things I notice online, and a thing which I kind of struggle to go against, you can keep saying it all day, but it doesn't change it. Right from the start, they have controlled the language that is used. So they always call trans women trans-identified males. And that's deliberate so that trans women are seen as men.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else uses that language. Nobody else has ever used that language. You know, I've been a trans activist for over a decade, and everybody just accepted the term trans women. Nobody was using trans-identified males or trans-identified females for trans guys. And when they say that now, when they try and turn around and say, well, we actually support trans people, but they want you in the spaces that you were assigned at birth, or they want you in a separate space. And I'm like, so how does put me in a separate space mean you support me?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's segregation. That's no being an ally to somebody. That's total segregation.
Mm-hmm. It's an odd waste of
Elected
activism.
women. When I got elected women's officer, it was like, well, how can you be a women's officer? You're not a... So like trans people aren't allowed any representation whatsoever unless we happen to create a trans officer somewhere. You know, and the vast majority of branches probably don't even have a trans person. So how are you going to have a trans officer? Or you're going to have a trans officer for you, yourself, in that branch? You're going to be your own officer. You know, it doesn't make any sense. But it's like the majority have controlled the narrative right the way through this discussion and how trans people are referred to, even though it's not language that we've used for the last decade.
It's new language to me, and it does seem strangely coordinated when, you know, people that like are anti-trans seem to use all the same terms for that nobody else uses. No other group, no other minority seems to use or have access to this language. Heather, what about yourself? How have you found online spaces since this kind of exploded into the mainstream press and stuff?
Well, for the most part, I've managed to go under the radar. So obviously, I've not been active enough. But what I found it's very insidious. So it's not the single one in your face being spat out at the street, but it's the little digs. It's not a knife to the chest. It's 1,000 pinpricks a day. That the last 4 or 5 months, every Sunday I've woken up and it's been a Sunday Times article that I've had to deal with or whatever, and it's just very wearing. It just wears you down very much, very easily.
And that will be 10 times worse under current circumstances with lockdown and pandemics. Much more difficult. Do you think it's a coordinated effort by some to silence trans people and non-binary people having a voice in politics?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think. I mean, I don't want to guess at their tactics, but I think if you look at the people who've recently come out as transphobic, they've all got a history of being sexually assaulted, and I think that's a way that people are using. That's a vulnerability that people are using to try and coerce these people into being transphobes. It's like, well, you've got to be careful about these trans women. They'll be, raiding your toilets, and you don't want that. And it's just it's very, very manipulative and very, very very insidious, very nasty.
I agree that there is a narrative pushing that false legitimacy of being, if you've been sexually assaulted or insulted in any way, then you must be transphobic, that makes completely no sense. I'm going to ask the rest of you if you do think it's a coordinated attempt so there are no trans voices in politics. So, Teddy, what do you think to that question?
So I thought that was really interesting, especially what you were saying. Just also to add on to what you were saying, Heather, I think this is coming into the wider discussion of what is this kind of politic and what are they trying to do to kind of push us out of public life. And I really think it is essentially trying to push us as on all forces, like toilets, rape crisis centers, even positions where we are materially vulnerable, and stop us from using that. So I think it's a very interesting discussion in terms of where their politics come from, because it's derived from it's derived from second wave radical feminism, which is very much rooted in white academic knowledge. Even though certainly this, I think it's very true what you said, Heather, that particularly they've been seeing this really insidious tactic of radicalizing particularly vulnerable women by bombarding them with almost trigger imagery, it's trans woman's going to come into a toilet and rape you. This is basically re-traumatizing vulnerable people in order to radicalize them into an ideology. But a lot of this also works on a public sphere level because it's attached to privilege. Because when we actually talk about, there's a lot of discussion, particularly in sexual violence theory and feminist theory, in terms of who is most deserving to be a victim, and it tends to be the pure white middle class woman being corrupted by the abject, it tends to be racially other, but also queer minorities. There's a very long history of this ideology. This is not a new thing. This has a very long and historical precedent. So I think it's really insidious because it actually erases outright our own precarity as a marginalized class. If you look at statistics, we are disproportionately affected by intimate partner violence. I've been abused by exes, I've been raped, I've been sexually assaulted, and I was terrified to go to a rape crisis center because I don't pass. I'm a non-binary person. I don't have any intention to pass. But even then, I had to use that service, and I was even scared picking up the phone, thinking, they're going to think I'm a predator. But rape crisis have been trained to work with trans people. Pretty much every rape crisis center in Scotland includes women and trans people. So by trans people, that's men, women, and non-binary people who are trans. So it just excludes cis men. And that's our material reality, and we need these services, but that's being queered and twisted away from us in order to kind of once again push us out of public life, out of the threat that we are this perpetrator predatory threat. Because I even remember, it comes back down to even my earliest experiences as a young trans kid. I used to walk to my friend's flat at night, and I'd have very bad makeup skills. I wouldn't look passing, but I wasn't a pretty sight, I'd say that as myself. But like I would have bottles thrown at me by both men and women because I would be seen as a monster, like this evil, like gross, like cross-dresser coming out at night. And I'm just like, if I think of this as a narrative, they'd see me as the predator because I'm out at night and dark and I look like something that's not normal. So I'd be cast as the predator attacking the vulnerable woman when in fact I'm actually getting attacked and my blood is coming out my body because like I'm getting cut, my feet are being cut to shreds by glass bottles. Like it's horrible. And I think it just, once again, it's a warping of, once again, a material understanding of our reality as a marginalized class, which is so sad.
Yeah, it's sad. I do think it's sad, especially when many of us have been victim of that narrative of being other, just being feared because you're other, whatever that other is. I don't see it being that difficult to appreciate that for, like, I'm a white guy for a black person, or for somebody who's non-gender conforming, or somebody who's a different sexuality from me. I don't see where the separation is there. What about Cass? What do you think? Do you think there is a coordinated effort to push people, like Teddy said, out of public life, and that being part of politics as well, pushed out of political life? Oh.
I think that is very much a thing. I would agree. I would absolutely agree. Because whenever something will be newsworthy, it'll be the usual characters, whether they're politically active or not, will start saying what they're saying. And I mean, the thing I've noticed recently, usually it'll start off as like there'll be a few in a party, but then it'll gather steam, and then other people, known transphobes in other parties will start with it. But I mean, I completely agree with Teddy. I mean, it's not just about forcing us out of political life. It's about getting support. I mean, you think you'd have moved away. I mean, I'm disabled as well. I'm also Jewish. Go figure. I like to tick every marginalised character box. Although, it's like, I've come out as things, or I have converted to things, and I have become disabled, or wasn't born disabled. But it's like, anything anybody is not comfortable with, they do not, it's like, oh, you can exist, that's fine. We just don't want to see you. And we don't want you near our friends, we don't want you near our children. And they're not interested in our experience. I think a lot of us have become political when it comes to trans matters and non-binary matters, because for us it's just who we are. But because other people are so fixated and obsessed with it, we're having to literally fight for our very right to be active on social media, to be able to go out and do what everybody else takes for granted. I mean, one of the most insane things I heard was, well, all of these trans and non-binary people, they should just use a disabled toilet. At which point I was like, there's not enough disabled toilets for us disabled people, and that's really, really bigoted. And I think a big thing as well is that people also don't seem to, they can't get it round their heads that for a lot of us, we all have this experience of actually losing privilege, whether it's when you first come out, it's the fact that you're not straight, whether the fact that you come out and say, well, yeah, I was assigned female at birth, I was assigned male at birth, but actually that's not who I am. And in my case, I realized the second that I started on my conversion path that I have lost the privilege. I mean, I'm lucky in that I can pass. I'd rather I didn't have to. But yeah, it's people don't actually understand that. I think all of us here have that whole we've lost privilege, and you don't realize you've lost it. None of them seem to get that. They don't want us anywhere. And people go, well, if you're getting hate online, just go offline. Well, my friends are all on social media because I'm autistic and I don't like being around people. That's my social network. Why should I not be allowed to take part in that because somebody else basically has some kind of a problem with who I am? But that is the reality, is that I think most people are fine, but there are some people very high up in political circles or celebrity circles who don't like us. They start this really rather negative chat, and Teddy is right. I know from having spoken to friends of mine who have been in vulnerable groups, you know, they had like closed Facebook groups, that this stuff is being anti-trans activists are going into these groups and they are spreading this stuff and they are preying on people's very real fears. I mean, I've been sexually assaulted twice. You know, it's really unpleasant. But I would not like to think that they're doing it deliberately. I'd like to think that it's part of their shared experience, but they're then in those groups and they're then saying these things, if that makes any sense. Because I don't want to make any wild accusations about anybody that they are deliberately going into these groups and preying on people, because I don't think that's the intent. But they've then got a captive audience, because I know friends of mine I would never have expected to say anti-trans things, and then I've discovered where it's come from, and I've been like,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with you that a lot of people who do take part in these sort of things online, they don't think that they're bad people. They think that they're doing the right thing for whatever their reasons are, and that's confusing in itself for me. I can't explain that either. Emma, what do you think? Do you think do you agree with everyone else that there is a coordinated effort?
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I mean, I don't know who by. I don't know kind of like who's at the top of this tree, but it's definitely being coordinated from somewhere. And as some of the others have said, you know, I think a lot of times people get kind of sucked into it for one reason and another. They don't fully understand it, but they hear these messages going out all the time, so they start to believe that this is true. And I think that's why it's important that it. I mean, we're at least 2 years too late now, but why it should have been stopped quickly, because it wasn't stopped quickly, a whole lot of people have been drawn into this stuff that wouldn't necessarily even have thought about it before. I mean, I know, I was just thinking, I was looking at it again today, there was supposed to be one of the events being held at the Scottish Parliament, the one that was first advertised to be held on Trans Day of Remembrance by Joan McAlpine and Jenny Mara, and they were bringing the Women's Declaration of Sex-Based Rights. Now, if you look through the Women's Declaration of Sex-Based Rights, it's not about the GRA. It is literally about trans people must be identified as the sex they're born as in every circumstance. You know, no GRA, no using the spaces that you should be using, no nothing. That is what their aim is. You know, I think the GRA was the thing that let them in the door. But this is what they're aiming for. They want to stop trans people having any of the rights they've currently got.
Yeah, I would agree. Dylan, I've got a different question for you that I'm going to ask everyone else. It's the last question regarding all what we've been talking about and all the abuse that we've all had online. If you could harness all that activism, all those voices, what would you ask them to campaign for?
I'm not entirely sure what.
No, that's fine. All the people online who are anti-trans, they're spending their time tweeting, writing complaints, contacting MPs. They're doing activism, but it's kind of barking up the wrong tree. They're not really doing much with that time other being anti-trans. If you could harness all that energy, what would you ask them to focus on?
Oh God. Okay.
No, not at all.
Well, there's no right answer, I guess, but well, my personal thing would be climate change / systemic inequality, because this is climate change is something that's only going to exacerbate inequality. It's going to hurt the people who are already unequal the most. It's going to take millions and millions of lives, and you can't really have equal rights if you're all dead. So, and you know, that's just like that'll affect trans people, and like, if the kind of world breaks down, we lose access to hormones and stuff. So like it will affect trans people, and it'll affect disabled people, and it'll affect ethnic minorities. It'll affect everyone. So that would kind of be my main overall thing, I guess. But yeah, I do kind of want to bounce off a couple of things that were said there, because I was just thinking through them. It's a pretty common tactic in these kind of conversations throughout history to pit minorities against each other or different vulnerable groups together. So what they said when we were in the 80s, I mean, obviously I wasn't in the 80s, but humanity was in the 80s, fighting about letting gay men and lesbians into the locker rooms. The idea was, oh my God, they're going to assault cis people, and they're going to assault all these vulnerable people. It's about pitting different vulnerabilities together. And then in the feminist movement, right at the start in America, the idea that they had was, if you give us the vote, we'll vote against black people for you. Because black people had recently been allowed, well, black men had been allowed to vote. So if white women got the vote, then they could vote against the black population. It's putting these minorities together, and then from all that stuff develop the black men are dangerous to white women. So it's just pitting that against each other, if that makes sense. And it can become quite violent, because I think at the top, you know, you've got the cis white rich man, really. That's straight man, you've got him at the top, that's like Boris Johnson type person. Diversity will always affect him in a bad way, because equality, when you're at the top, feels like oppression, and they will do anything they can to keep that privilege. And even if you have other things that you could be oppressed for, it's hard to understand that when you feel like, because women, I don't always believe that cis women who hate trans people actually always it's about hate. I think a lot of it is just not understanding and realizing that equality isn't actually going to hurt you. Like, you're not losing anything, you're just leveling the playing field. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
I totally agree with you. I think like climate change and structural inequalities, which you just explained perfectly there, and working to help end material inequalities for others will end material inequalities for us all. That's the aim of the game, is it not? That's what we're all trying to do here. Now I forgot the question. Oh, I remember. Emma, I'll ask you, if you could harness all that energy, all that activism, what would you ask them to campaign for?
Well, Dylan's covered the climate change thing, which I think is good as a Green member and a young person, because they're obviously going to be here a lot longer than me. But I think sometimes I just look at the amount of energy and the amount of money that seems to be around in these anti-trans groups, and I'm going, we have so much inequality. We have poverty, we have people struggling with disability, you know, all the stuff with the bloody DWP and all the rest of it. The violence against women sector always needs money, is always unfunded, and they're attacking it at the moment. And I just think, you know, if we could actually all come together and put that money to the common good, we might actually make some change here. We might actually create a better world, rather than, you know, this particular branch of mainly cis women attacking a minority. You know, we should all be focused on how do we challenge, it's already came up, how do we challenge the rich cis white guy? How do we make the world more equal for the rest of us?
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that's kind of what's part of the frustration. I think you will all feel it. A lot of anti-trans people make valid points about material inequality, but they waste these points by using them to attack trans people. We should all be trying to end that inequality together. Heather, what about you? If you could harness that activism, that energy, what would you campaign for?
Let me unmute myself. So just to pick up what Emma and Dylan were saying, it's about equality. We have a very straight, white, old able-bodied parliament in Holyrood, and I think we need more LGBT, ethnic minorities, and disabled people in Parliament. So I think for an immediate thing, I think that would be my where I would aim all that resources at.
Myself, I can see that automatically solving a lot of problems.
Yeah, we need we definitely need more diverse people elected.
Voices with the authority to speak. Yeah. Cass.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I agree.
At all
Cass, what
levels
about
of
yourself? If you could harness all that activism.
If I could harness all that activism and I had, I would be, because everybody's right. The center of this is white patriarchy, privileged patriarchy, and they have at the moment the big thing we've got is we have the Jewish community fighting the black community. We have it's just completely mental. I think the way to tackle this, if I had a magic wand, I'd be throwing, if you're ever, as Heather is absolutely right, on the other side of it, we're not going to get anywhere tackling systemic inequality and inequity if we don't put money into a proper, effective diversity education about difference, challenging people's stereotypes, challenging people's unconscious bias. Because there's a lot of good people out there who do still demonstrate unconscious bias. I mean, I have to remind myself of that every day because I'm not perfect. Because I grew up white and I grew up privileged, white middle class. But you have that has to change. And I mean, it's not just about educating kids in school. It's actually about taking nurses and doctors and teachers, people being trained lawyers, everybody aside and going, no, you need to sit through this seminar about unconscious bias and about stereotypes. You need to understand, you need to look at, literally, you need to throw this at every section of life and challenge it. So, I mean, education and representation. But Emma's absolutely right. It's all this money. Why isn't it? Why are they going? Why are they buying new mattresses when they could be donating it to refuges? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a good point about education and being able to critically analyze and to know when you're being fed information to get a response that you want, and when you've just so you don't get involved in things that don't really matter to you, or do you know what I mean? Or to get involved in the right side of things. Teddy, what about yourself? If you could harness, this should be a good answer because you've had the longest to think of one. So if you could harness all that energy and activism, what would you ask them to campaign for?
The abolition of imperialist, capitalist, hetero, cis, white, ableist, anthropocentric patriarchy. I think is a nice place to start. I think the movie Commune would come afterwards, I guess. But I guess it's really, I think that's because honestly, the amount of energy they've spent ogling my face and my beard on Twitter, they could have honestly knocked one of those off the tick list, I imagine, at this point. But if I'm going to be actually honest here, I think there's a lot of issues I feel I have a lot of pain towards. I think if we even look right now with the whole GRA discussion, it's siphoning energy away from real material issues. I think Cass brought up a really valid one there, which is education. We do need anything that goes against cost cutting and cost turning, particularly for education, ends up having this situation where educators aren't being taught about LGBT inclusivity. As a young queer kid, I was bullied by not just the kids, but actually by teachers who used to stop me in the corridor for walking too effeminately. And what we need there is actual insertion of public services to actually be funded so they can get time away to actually be educated to do that. I think also we are dealing with a health crisis right now, particularly for trans people, and that's due to our services being provided on tertiary basis where they need to be centralized under primary care from our GPs, and we need greater funding, of course, for that specialized service to be conducted, because at this point the wait times are up to 2 years and even sometimes 3 years just for accessing basic healthcare for this new emerging generation of trans people coming out. So I think that on that level, on a state-based level, that's what I feel for, particularly for trans people. But even then, I think what the Black Lives Matter movement has really taught me, and it taught a lot of people, is about the importance of grassroots transformative justice. Like, it's actually the stuff that we do on the base level in our communities which are so vital and important. So what I would like to see is more funding and more just general activism being put towards like care networks, help providing food, like support and emotional, like even like small, like I even use a local rape crisis service that's specifically for trans people, that is grassroots. And that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the help that I did unless that was funded and given the support it needed by people in communities. So in that circumstance, I think like healing and care networks on a grassroots level are so important, and that's where a lot of energy I wish was being directed, but instead we're got it toward my beard.
Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Right, I have to say before that I did ask the Scottish Conservatives if they had anybody that wanted to come along tonight, but I didn't get a reply. But thankfully, I'm so grateful that you've all joined us tonight. Thanks for answering the questions. Thanks for giving your time and giving such great answers. I'll thank you. I've got Heather Herbert for LGBT plus Labour Scotland, and you're also the trans officer as well. Teddy Hope is you convener from Out for Indy, the official LGBT wing for SNP. Emma Cuthbertson, who is convener for Rainbow Greens. Cass MacDonald from the Liberal Democrats, and Dylan Hamilton from the Scottish Youth Parliament. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on board tonight. And I'll let these all go now. Right, and that's me from tonight as well. All I've got to do now is thank yous for watching and thank Colin for his technical support.